Hello, my name is Protik Mukhopadhyay. I'm an entrepreneur and an author. I'll be hosting the Reimagine Sales Systems podcast, where I'll be bringing some of the industry thought leaders who will be sharing their go-to-market strategies for their business systems. All right, everyone. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Hillary Caviglia with me on the podcast. Uh, and I'm excited to share her journey in the enterprise world and get to learn about what she's doing in her current role. So with that, Hillary, do you want to talk about your current role and where you are? And then we can talk a little bit about your journey in the enterprise world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. My current role is Senior Director of Business Systems Operations. I am with Barracuda Networks, and I've been with the company for about 5 years, a little over 5 years. And up until this past year, I was in a role in sales operations. And we didn't have a full-fledged business systems team at that up until that point. So business systems is rather business systems as a formal function is rather new to me, although I've been doing business systems my entire career almost. So my journey has been pretty fun. I've done a lot of different things, and wouldn't necessarily go back and change too many of them. Of course, in hindsight is 2020, and there are some things that I may do a little bit differently. Let's see. I started in. Well, let me actually go back to my current role. So I'm responsible for the business systems team, or the business systems operations team, which is a team of business analysts and project leaders, and we are responsible for working with our global process leaders to define business process and then put it into system. And so we have a pretty fun role in that we touch a lot of different things within the company, particularly around go-to-market. So we work very closely with the sales team and the support teams. Those are our biggest stakeholders. We also work closely with finance, accounting, some with manufacturing, some with product teams. We touch, but marketing is also a pretty large stakeholder. And so we touch a lot of pretty much every different function within the organization, engineering in some cases. So, we get a really, really broad perspective on what's going on within the company at most times. So that's, I think, the biggest thing that I like about my role, and my team tends to like about their role. And my journey has been kind of through operations for the most part. So started out of college, out of my undergraduate, in a operations role. It was a very administrative operations role, but I learned about building processes, and I think that was one of the most important things that I learned in my career, was how to build a process, how to take something and make it more efficient. And I was able to, I've been able to kind of take that along my career journey. And I think that's probably one of the biggest assets that I've been able to bring to the table in so much of my journey, both from a sales operations perspective to a business systems perspective. And then early on in my career, very early on in my career, before I even really knew what a CRM was, I was responsible for an implementation of Salesforce. So it was a fun experience. It was a very small company, thankfully, but it was definitely a really good experience. And so, I got access to one of the newest technologies, or one of the newest platforms in the industry. This was, I don't know, maybe Salesforce was 5 years old at that point.
Oh, wow.
And so I kind of became this fan of Salesforce pretty early on in my career, and have had a lot of experience working in the system, and at one point was a certified admin, and still take those skills with me
Right.
today, not the
Right.
certification, but the skills. And so that's another thing that I think was a real benefit early on in my career, was getting some really, really close experience with implementation of a CRM, and then using it and just figuring out how to build processes, how to
Right.
make the users more efficient, etc.
Awesome, Ellery. I
Yeah.
know we were speaking last time and you mentioned about your background that is not typical and you have a lot more operations than finance background. And I know while you were also a sales ops leader, you got your MBA and now you're at Barracuda. So in your, what do you think, based on your background, how are you leveraging your strengths in your role? Is it the big picture perspective that helps you? Is it knowledge of Salesforce? If you can share some insights, I think that'll be awesome.
So, I think knowledge of Salesforce has helped me in a business systems role, but more on the sales or the support side, and just understanding how, pardon me, understanding how, how Salesforce works, or how a CRM works technically. And I would say that that's been, an advantage for sure, just having that more somewhat technical knowledge. I would say that, I think that the MBA definitely helped me to be able to, I would say that the MBA really brought more confidence than anything, that, the ideas that I had were relevant and not, not completely out of left field. And I think that's one thing I would encourage a lot of people who are, not sure about where they want to go to continue education, whatever that education is. I would encourage them to continue some kind of an education. I would say that probably the most relevant things that I bring to the table in my role are the ability to see the big picture and understand the strategy that's coming down from the top, and how to execute that, figure out how to execute that within our systems. And I definitely think that there is just, having experience in some of the tools and technologies, and having experience in working with so many different functions within the organization, and understanding which functions bring which value, and how to leverage the different functions. And then being able to build relationships across the organization, of course, is also very, very critical. And I think that that's one thing that I learned pretty early on in my career, is that it's very, very important to have relationships in all of the different, functional areas that you'll work with.
Exactly. That's good. Now let's do a little bit dive about the go-to-market strategy that you see in Barracuda. Like, can you share a little bit about what is the go-to-market strategy that they have, and how do you help to keep that in alignment in your role?
Right, sure. So our company's go-to-market strategy is channel, and we have, in some cases, a one-tiered channel, in other cases a 2 or 3-tiered channel. In that we, work directly with resellers, we work through distribution. Globally, we work much more through distribution. We are a global company, and we are operating in. I don't know exactly how many countries in the world, but the majority of the countries in the world we're definitely operating in. And so we have a team that we work with internationally and domestically, of course. Let's see. We are mostly SMB to this point, but we're definitely have been expanding into kind of that higher tier. So expanding into enterprise somewhat. Let's see, how does my team help to enable that strategy? So when you're mostly SMB, you have to have a lot of customers, right, to drive revenue. And so efficiency is really, really, really critical. And some of the projects that we're working on right now are driving automation, so that, we can touch more of our customers on a more regular basis without a huge effort from a person, an individual, to be able to do that. We can provide the service that they need, we can provide the communication that they need, but without a really high touch experience. We one of the biggest projects that we're working on right now is automation of renewals. That's a really, really critical project for us. Other projects are that we're working on are making it just a general premise of making it easier to transact with Barracuda. So think e-commerce, think no need to communicate with us to be able to get whatever products and pricing you need, stuff like that.
Right. I think Salesforce in that way, I mean, we use Salesforce internally, you probably use it. I think they are really pioneers because with a credit card, you can downgrade, upgrade, do core term. I think that's a great, because they also sell to SMBs and large customers. Interesting.
Right.
So that's kind of a related question, and thanks for giving that whole go-to-market plan. I didn't know so many details, so thanks. So in terms of systems, right? If we have to take a deep dive, like what systems have you deployed internally to kind of enable this strategy? And some of it could be homegrown, some of them could be out of the box. If you can share a little bit about the systems that you have.
Right, sure. So we recently, over the past 2 years, had re-implemented. We've done a digital transformation at Barracuda, and it's been one of the most one of the largest learning experiences I've ever had. Let's talk about a quick MBA, but in business systems. We've recently made some transitions in that. We use Salesforce as our CRM currently. We use CPQ. We use obviously an order system, and we recently just transitioned from a homegrown or a proprietary order system to a more out-of-the-box configurable order system. We use a billing module within that order system as well, and that's, I think, been one of the more recent implementations, and so we're still learning a lot about that and how that works and what the benefits and the drawbacks are. So I can't say I have a ton to speak to on that one. We do still have a homegrown. We have a number of homegrown systems. We've got some very incredibly smart people that work at Barracuda and have really been able to take our business and build a system to fit the needs of that. And so, this last 2 years has really been about scalability and getting our organization to a point where it takes fewer people to do things. It our systems are dependable, and so that's been a really good experience. We, as I mentioned, we have a proprietary provisioning system that also drives manufacturing. And then we have we use marketing automation. Obviously, that one's pretty critical, and we're still kind of working on implementing some systems or understanding the requirements around a system to track attribution from a marketing perspective. So that's something that's really kind of on the top of our minds as well.
Related to this is, especially in your leadership role in the business systems world, is adoption, right? So can you share a little bit about how many users are actually using the systems you described? How do you enable adoption, and any strategies that you have done to make sure that you can show ROI back to your leadership, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we have really good adoption, I think, at Barracuda, in that, I believe we have good adoption, I'll say that. We have over 1,000 or over, I want to say almost 1,200 users internally. And I think, I'm not sure exactly how many employees we have right now, but I think we've got like 1,500 or something like that worldwide. So we've got a very large number of people that are using the systems. And that's, I guess, that's our biggest system usage, which is Salesforce. So from a, total business systems perspective, I would say that, each role has a different function and therefore uses different systems. And I think that we have built the processes in a way that really do force the users to use the systems. And there are very few people who have the ability to work around those systems. And we've kept that pretty close to the chest, to be honest with you, just so that, the objective of the company in digital transformation at Barracuda was scalability. That was our biggest objective. And so, in order to achieve that scalability, we really have to see that usage within the systems. And so we've pretty much built the processes to rely on the systems, which gets tricky if you ever have any downtime, obviously. So we do have, workarounds in which we can, figure out how to work around those things, but they get used very, very rarely, and only by a very select group of people. So I would say that, that's one good thing that we've done from an adoption perspective is kind of built everything into the system so that it's non-optional.
In terms of challenges, right? I mean, you mentioned about a large transformation you did to re-implement the solutions. You also mentioned a little bit about your order management system that went from homegrown to out of the box. So any lessons learned or best practices that you could share for the audience that they can take back as they are thinking about transformation projects or complex use cases?
So couple critical learnings, I would say, is one is get the end users involved early and often. And I mean, figure out a way to get people excited about what you're doing from a systems perspective so that they can be your champions. I think that's one thing that's really, really critical, is to get the user feedback really, really early on, and even have them help to define the problem. And when they are involved that early in the process, they then have some kind of a sense of ownership for it, right? And somewhat become your champions, and not only that, but give potentially really good feedback. Obviously, one thing that's really critical with that is figuring out a reward system, or I'd like to say a reward system, because oftentimes it's not their job to do, to provide that kind of feedback. And so you have to find the right people who are going to give the right input, but make sure that you figure out a way to reward those folks as well. That's one learning. Another learning is document everything.
Right.
Never shy away from documentation. Right. Never assume somebody understands what you're asking for. Understanding how to write a use case and acceptance criteria is very, very critical. And we find that over and over and over again. And let's see. I think another thing that is really important is to have a bridge between the functional and the technical. And I think that's one of the things that I've been learning over the last year, is how important it is to understand from a testing perspective, right? My team is responsible. So my team is responsible for defining business requirements. So working with the functional teams to define the business requirements, and then working with the technical team to define the solution. And I think that, having a little bit more of a technical aptitude in a business systems role is really, really, really critical, in that if you don't necessarily understand how something is built, you won't always know how to test that functionality. And so that's one of the biggest learnings that we've had.
Right. I think that's a great point. And that's really
kind of a
insightful.
Tactical issue, but
right.
It's really, really important. So.
No, these are really good insights. I think a lot our audience and folks who are in your role can take key takeaways.
Maybe.
So 2020 was an interesting year. Obviously, as a business, people got impacted. I'm sure on a personal side also there were changes. But what are the priorities that your team has in 2021? Like, how do you see that shaping up? And was any of those priorities different from 2020? Can you share little insights of how you're approaching next year's activities?
Yeah. I feel like in so many cases, personally, professionally, in so many ways, everyone's just trying to survive 2020, right?
Yes.
We'll all look back on history and go, wow, that was quite a year.
Right.
So here's to hoping that it's over quickly in 2021. So, there's a part of that we're going to bring forward with us is that survival mode. But I also feel like both personally and professionally, we've been doing this for a while now, and it can be about more than survival, and it can be about being strategic and thoughtful. And of course, there was some of that in 2020. Don't get me wrong; we weren't all flailing around, but I definitely think that some of the things that I've already talked about are things that we're still working on, that are still works in progress. I think that, we still have, a charter as a business systems operations team to work towards automation, to work towards scalability, to work towards simplification of processes, so making things more usable, and just in general, supporting whatever the needs of the business are. So we've got a pretty big focus as an organization right now on the customer 360, understanding who our customers are and being able to provide them content, products, solutions in real time based on what their needs are, our history with them. So understanding, the data that surrounds all of our customers. We've got, as I mentioned, automation, simplification.
Right.
So we've got a lot of different. Those are just more the high level priorities that we're really focused on as an organization, and then also, definitely with business systems, because we touch a lot of those things.
That's been helpful. Hildy, it was such a pleasure to know you and have you on the podcast. My final question is on advice. What advice would you give someone who is early in their career? Let's say they have spent 2 to 3 years in doing reporting, ops, and if they want to aspire to become a director like you, how should they think of managing their career? What courses, what projects they should take? Should they get into consulting? Should they stick to an internal role? Any advice you can give us? That would be really awesome.
Yeah. So, it's such a unique, right, consulting versus internal roles. It's such a unique, and it's really, I think, really about the preference of the customer or of the individual. I've not done consulting in my career, so I can't speak to that a ton, and I know I'm kind of honing in on that. But I would say, the roles that I have had, I've just figured out how to expand them. And I think that's really important, is to own your role and then figure out how to expand it. This may be a good thing or a bad thing, but there are very few things that I've ever said no to in my career, and it's never linear. And I think that's one of the things that I learned, maybe from Sheryl Sandberg's books, but it's never a straight line, right? You may go in a lot of different directions to find the direction that you really like and that you're really comfortable in and that you really add value in. But I think one of the biggest things that I've done in my career is just to have never really said no to the next thing that was presented to me. So anytime, someone came to me with a new project, of course I would try to do my due diligence on it and figure out what was going on, but what that would mean for me, but I just kept taking on new things and learning new things. And I think another piece of advice I would have is know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Don't know everything.
Right.
When you know everything, then you're, then you can get kind of pigeonholed into a certain thing. But know enough to be dangerous, and then figure out how to leverage that to continue to grow. And the last thing I'll say, sorry, I know I'm saying a lot of things here, but the last thing I say is, don't ever underestimate the power of data analysis.
Yep.
Learn how to do data analysis. Learn how to understand data. Learn how to translate data into a process and understand the process that feeds the data. I think that's something that's really, really important too. The things that you work with in business systems are data and processes. And I think that having a pretty good understanding of both of those, how to build a process and how to analyze data, are very, very important.
That's really insightful. Thanks, Hilary.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure to know you as a person, to hear about your journey. And I think you've been really open about sharing your experiences. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So with that, I would like to thank Hilary for joining us, and we wish her all the best. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So with that, I would like to wrap up this podcast. Thank you all for tuning into Reimagine Enterprise Sales Systems. To listen to more exciting podcasts, please visit my website, protikm.com or protikm.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, and other channels that you follow, so that you'll never miss a show.